Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. U.S. stocks rallied sharply to close at record highs on Wednesday after Republican Donald Trump won the 2024 U.S. presidential election. The Dow Industrials, S&P 500, and NASDAQ Composite each ended at record levels, with investors expecting lower taxes, deregulation, and the U.S. president, who is not shy to weigh in on everything from the stock market to the dollar, although fresh tariffs could bring challenges in the form of a higher deficit and inflation. The Republicans win, powering a rally in so-called Trump trades, sending U.S. Treasury yields sharply higher, with the benchmark 10-year note yield hitting a 4-month high of 4.479%. Bitcoin hit a record high of over $75,000, and the dollar was on track for its biggest one-day percentage gain since September 2022. It was a stunning comeback 4 years after being voted out of the White House, when polls indicated a very tight race, with some concern the process could be drawn out before a victor was declared.
This is historic. We are looking at the biggest up move in the Dow in about 2 years. We're up close to 1,500 points, and the Dow's actually beating the S&P and the NASDAQ, which are both having big days as well. And the big winner, small cap stocks, up over 5%. So clearly, the stock market is loving the Donald Trump win. However, the bond market, not so much. Bonds are selling off.
Here in Asia, most stocks dropped as investors weighed the market ramifications of a second Trump presidency with its promise of steeper tariffs. The dollar edged higher after surging more than 1% on Wednesday. Bloomberg reports benchmark equity gauges slipped in China, Australia, and South Korea and were mixed in Japan. Oil steadied after a roller coaster session on Wednesday as traders weighed the likely impact of Donald Trump's election victory and a build in U.S. crude inventories. Brent traded above $75 a barrel after swinging in a more than $2 arc in the previous session and slightly lower, while West Texas Intermediate was near $72. Meanwhile, commercial crude stockpiles rose 2.15 million barrels to the highest since August. Taking a quick look at Philippine stocks, it's taking a nosedive after Trump's historic win. The main index falling almost 3%, now back below the 7,000 level. Philippine equity is currently the worst performer in the region, as Japan's Nikkei 225, Topics, Shanghai Composite all down about 0.5%. We will continue to watch the PSEI's performance throughout the day on BNC.
There's a lot of anticipation and anxiety around the election, the possibility that we won't know the result first thing in the morning. But the thing is, you have all of this anxiety about the election set against a very favorable backdrop for the market. Strong earnings, soft landing, Fed looking to cut rates this week as well. And so in absence of some other catalyst, I think the trend is going to be higher. And certainly with a favorable seasonal backdrop as well. So I think you have probably a light volume day, but in absence of something negative, the trend is higher right now.
Well, big tech leaders extend their congratulations to Donald Trump despite his history of criticism and threats against some of them. Among them is Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, whom Trump once threatened with imprisonment. Other tech executives who have offered their support include Apple's Tim Cook, Google and Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. They've all expressed their readiness to work with the new administration. Elon Musk's growing influence could mean major profits for his companies if Donald Trump is reelected in 2024. Reports that Musk, now an outspoken supporter of Trump, is positioning Tesla, SpaceX, and other companies to benefit from new government contracts and policies under a Trump administration. In particular, Tesla could see advantages in a relaxed regulatory environment, which Trump has openly endorsed. SpaceX may benefit from military contracts and potentially billions in funding. Musk has also supported Trump's campaign by backing pro-Trump political action committees. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong saw his net worth increase by $2 billion after a stunning election day surge in Coinbase stock. The company's shares jumped by 17%, fueled by growing optimism in crypto regulation under the next administration. Investors are hoping the new policies will stabilize crypto markets and provide a clear regulatory path. This comes as Coinbase strives to regain market share amid tough competition in the crypto space. Technology giant Qualcomm has surprised Wall Street, forecasting stronger sales and profits than expected for the upcoming quarter. Qualcomm projects sales to reach between $10.5 and $11.5 billion, beating analyst estimates. Profits per share are forecast to rise between $2.40 and $2.60 per share. This outlook comes despite challenges in the global chip industry and slowing smartphone sales. Qualcomm credits its strong prospects to diversifying into automotive and Internet of Things markets, which could offset weak demand in mobile. Analysts are watching Qualcomm as it continues to shift away from traditional markets and explore new revenue streams. Canada has ordered the wind-up of TikTok's Canadian operations in a bid to increase national security. This move requires TikTok to close all business operations within Canada, though the app is available to users. Canada's government cited growing concerns about data privacy and TikTok's ties to the Chinese government. Officials warn that Canadian user data could be vulnerable to foreign influence and cybersecurity threats. This move follows similar actions by the U.S. and European nations and is part of a larger global effort to regulate TikTok more strictly. The Bank of England has decided to hold off on interest rate cuts amid concerns over inflation and high mortgage rates. Economists were expecting a rate reduction in response to the country's slowing growth, but bank officials warn it could be delayed until early next year. With inflation still above target, the central bank fears that an early cut could risk stoking prices. Mortgage holders may face higher rates for longer as a result. The European Union is poised to invest massively in its defense capabilities with an ambitious new air shield that could cost up to 500 billion euros. That's according to Lithuanian Prime Minister Andrius Kubilius. This high-priced initiative aims to bolster air defenses amid growing security concerns in Eastern Europe. The new defense chief warns, or EU defense chief warns, that such an investment is necessary to protect member states from aerial threats, including drones and missiles. The proposal comes as the EU aims to reduce its reliance on NATO support and build up independent defense capabilities. Pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca is facing new challenges in China as local authorities launch an investigation into one of its executives. This probe is reportedly unrelated to the country's ongoing medical insurance investigations, but focuses on corporate practices in the Chinese market. This comes as China continues to tighten security, or rather scrutiny, on international pharmaceutical companies. AstraZeneca says it is fully cooperating with authorities as the outcome of this probe could have wide-ranging impacts on its operations in one of its largest markets. South America is emerging as a big winner amid escalating trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Brazilian agribusiness leader Minerva Foods is positioning itself to capture a greater share of China's food market, which has grown to rely on South American exports. With the U.S. and China increasingly at odds, Minerva is seeing rising demand for its products in Asia. Executives expect continued growth as China shifts more agricultural imports away from the U.S. And Virgin Galactic has announced it will halt all suborbital tourism flights with its current VSS Unity spaceplane by mid-2024. The company is shifting its resources toward developing its next-generation Delta-class spaceplane, which will be more cost-effective and accommodate more passengers. This decision, however, comes at a cost. Virgin Galactic reports a temporary drop in revenue as it pauses commercial spaceflight operations, aiming to resume in 2026 with the Delta series. The country's economic growth data for the third quarter will be released today at 10 a.m. Economists expect GDP to have slowed to 5.7% due to tempered household spending. On Wednesday, the Philippine Statistics Authority revised the Q2 growth rate upward slightly to 6.4% from the previously announced 6.3% on upticks in manufacturing, real estate, as well as accommodation and food service. Follow the Money. We'll be right back. Stay with us on BNC, always on top. Welcome back. The country's third quarter gross domestic product slowed to 5.2%. That figure is worse than economists' expectations, who anticipated GDP to have slowed to 5.7% due to tempered household spending. And also, it's far less than the 6.4% reported in the second quarter. Meanwhile, the Philippines is at a golden moment. That declaration from Finance Secretary Ralph Recto following a report from the Philippine Statistics Authority that the country's employment rate rose to 96.3% in September. The jobless rate, meanwhile, dropped to 3.7%. Recto sees the improvement in the labor market as a sign that the Philippines is harnessing its competitive advantage by providing more economic opportunities for Filipinos. As the holiday season approaches, Recto says they expect more employment available, particularly in retail trade, as well as accommodation and food services. Philippines sees its largest trade deficit in 20 months. Data from the Philippine Statistics Authority shows the trade gap in September reached $5.1 billion, a 43% increase from the $3.4 billion shortfall recorded in the same month last year. This latest figure is also 16% higher than the deficit in August. The widening deficit comes as exports declined while imports rose. The U.S. remains the Philippines' top export destination, accounting for $1.1 billion or 17% of total exports. The country's agricultural output also plunges, recording its steepest decline in nearly 4 years. Production fell by 3.7% in the third quarter, much worse than the drop of 0.2% in the same period last year. In the first 9 months, output shrank by 2.2%, a reversal from the growth of 0.2% a year ago. The Agriculture Department attributes the slower farm production to adverse weather conditions and to the impact of African swine fever. Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel seeks a probe into a 50-year lease contract between the government-owned Center for International Trade Expositions and Mission, or CITEM, and the Philippine Exporters Confederation. Pimentel reveals CITEM has allowed PhilExport to lease 4.9 hectares of prime property in Pasay City at a rate of 1,000 pesos per year. The senator describes the deal as grossly disadvantageous to the government. Pimentel adds the prime lot is not creating reasonable revenues, which could and should have been used for CITEM's operations. The lease contract was entered into in 1996 by then Trade Secretary Rizalino Navarro. The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, approves a new round of major infrastructure projects aimed at driving economic growth and strengthening national security. One key project is the 27 billion peso Philippine International Exhibition Center under the Philippine Reclamation Authority. This facility, which is part of the National Tourism Development Plan, will serve as a premier venue for international exhibitions, conventions, and trade shows designed to elevate the country's global tourism profile and economic influence. NEDA also approves budget increases and design modifications for 2 flood control projects under the Department of Public Works and Highways, improvements crucial to protecting communities and infrastructure against climate risks. In addition, NEDA greenlights the acquisition of 14 new patrol boats, along with support equipment and logistics for Philippine Coast Guard. NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan says this will strengthen maritime security while helping deter smuggling and other illegal activities. These approvals show the government's focus on infrastructure, which drives economic growth while fortifying national security and climate resilience. Now, despite elevated interest rates, the real estate arm of the Zobel conglomerate sees strong performance in the first 9 months of the year. Ayala Land's net income rose 15% year-on-year to 21.2 billion pesos. That's as consolidated sales increased 27% to 125.2 billion. The company's president and CEO, Ana Margarita Bautista D., credits what she says are reinvention initiatives coupled with signs of market headwinds clearing. Key launches in the third quarter include the Orchard Vistas at Anvaya Cove in Bataan, Centria Stories in Vermosa in Cavite, and the Ayala Greenfield Estates Brookside Park in Calamba, Laguna. And that is it for today's edition of Follow the Money. Stay on BNC.